As my vision blurred, the last image that seared into my mind was Amelia's distraught face. Her voice cut through the growing fog, whispering a heart-wrenching, "I'm sorry," as she held my dying body. Betrayal had never been so personal, so intimately crushing. With Amelia's poison coursing through my veins, I, Mason Sullivan, met an undeserving end. The universe, however, had other plans. Blinking my eyes open, I found myself waking up to an unfamiliar room, in an unfamiliar body. The woman hovering over me, worry etched across her face, was none other than Claire. Claire, the mastermind behind my downfall, now stood before me as my mother. "Ethan, you're running late for school." School, right. I was Ethan now, a 12-year-old boy who's got a dead man's memories, including the knowledge of his grim future. A grim future unless I changed it. "Mom, I've got an idea about a business venture." The look of shock on her face was priceless, but behind the shock, I saw a flicker of interest. For the next 3 years, I used my foreknowledge, guiding my mother Claire and her business toward a path of prosperity. By the time I was 15, we were multimillionaires. Ironic, isn't it? The son she never wanted was the very one who brought her fortune. Yet amidst this wealth and power, an unease persisted. I was living with the enemy, the woman who had manipulated Amelia into ending my previous life. But now, she was oblivious to the fact that the son she was raising was the same man she had plotted against in her past life. We were sitting in our sprawling garden one evening when she looked at me, a strange expression on her face. "You have his eyes, Ethan," she said, referring to Mason Sullivan. "I can't help but see him in you." A shiver ran down my spine. She was coming dangerously close to the truth. Still, I managed to hold my composure. "Maybe I'm meant for greatness too, just like him," I answered, feigned innocence in my voice. She smiled, her eyes welling up with motherly affection. It was a heartbreaking sight, knowing she was the one who had cost me my previous life. Her next word sent my heart into a frenzy. "Are you scared of the future, Ethan?" Was I scared? Absolutely. But I was also ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. "Never, Mom." The look in her eyes softened as she pulled me into a warm embrace. It was a twisted game I'd been reborn into, a battlefield concealed by a family facade. I was playing a game of survival and revenge, and there was no turning back. The war had just begun, and I was in it to win. Looking into the mirror, I was met with a face I knew but didn't recognize. A mop of curly hair, a smattering of freckles over the nose, but my eyes, at least that part stayed with me. I was Mason Sullivan, not this 12-year-old boy I saw in the mirror, Ethan Daniels. "Ethan, breakfast!" Claire's voice echoed through the house. My stomach twisted. It wasn't right, hearing her call out a name that wasn't mine. It wasn't right. Her voice filled with love when I knew exactly the treachery she was capable of. Every morning was a reality check, a harsh reminder of the bizarre twist my life had taken. As I trudged downstairs to join my mother for breakfast, I could feel my old life slipping away, replaced by the reality of my new existence. Business ideas, shares, mergers, thoughts that shouldn't bother a 12-year-old, raced through my mind. I was plotting to rise to power while balancing school, puberty, and the delicate act of deceiving Claire. It was a balancing act, one wrong move away from disaster. The breakfast table was a battlefield, the food merely pawns in a bigger game. I'd drop hints about stocks to buy, companies to invest in. Claire, to her credit, picked up on them. "Ethan, how do you know about these things?" she'd ask, her eyes wide with surprise. "Video games, Mom," I'd reply with a grin, playing the part of an innocent kid. And to her, I was just that, a smart entrepreneurial boy with a knack for making money. Every passing day was a struggle to suppress Mason and play Ethan, to act like I belonged in this body, in this life. Yet, I couldn't help but feel like a fraud, trapped in someone else's life, forced to play along. But then, I would remember the power I now wielded, the wealth I was accumulating. Each passing day brought me closer to revenge. The lines between Ethan and Mason were blurring, merging into a single entity. I wasn't just Ethan or Mason, I was both. "Are you okay?" Claire's words snapped me back to reality. I looked at her, my heart pounding, her question resonating with the fear and confusion within me. "Yes, Mom." I was scared, yes, but more than that, I was ready. Ready to take back what was once mine. Ready to claim my rightful place. Ready to be Mason Sullivan once again. And this time, nothing was gonna stand in my way. "Ethan, dinner's ready." The call came from Claire, the woman I knew as the mastermind behind my murder in my past life. But in this one, my mother. Hearing her voice filled with affection was nothing short of surreal. I ran the empire in the shadows now, a mere boy making moves on a global chessboard. The world knew me as a prodigy, a child who'd turned a small inheritance into a billion-dollar empire. In reality, I was an old soul, using the wisdom of my previous life to bend the world to my will. Days were filled with school, playing, and acting the part of the perfect son, while the nights were for reclaiming what was once mine, one strategic move at a time. It was an odd evening when I asked Claire, "Mom, tell me about your rival, the man you said you could never beat." Claire looked at me, her eyes wide. "Mason Sullivan. He was formidable. But why are you interested in old tales?" "Just a story. Yes, that's what my life had been reduced to, an old tale." "Just curious, Mom," I replied, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "I want to learn from his mistakes." "Mistakes?" Oh, he had many. His worst? Trusting the wrong people. The irony was bitter, the echo of my past life, a chilling reminder of the betrayal, of the poison, all served with a smile. But I was patient. The time wasn't right yet for the world to know that Ethan Daniels was, in essence, Mason Sullivan reincarnated. And when they did, it would be the ultimate checkmate. I'd make sure of it. The Sullivan Empire would rise again, and the prodigal son would reclaim his throne. "Ethan, time to sleep," Claire called, ruffling my hair. In my past life, I never had a mother to tuck me into bed, but in this one, my enemy was my mother. A bizarre comedy indeed. I was a billionaire now, the world's youngest, built it all up from scratch. But it wasn't easy, especially since I had to make sure my business didn't outshine the Sullivan Empire just yet. It was like playing chess with a blindfold, always holding back, waiting for the right time to strike. "Ethan, you should consider investing in other companies, Diversify your portfolio." I suppressed a grin. She was steering me right where I wanted to go. "Really, Mom? Which one do you suggest?" "The Sullivan Empire. They're always solid." Well, well, well. This was just like a scene out of a sitcom. My past nemesis, unknowingly guiding me to regain control of my past life's empire. "All right, Mom. I'll buy some shares of the Sullivan Empire." Within months, I became one of the major shareholders of Sullivan Empire. My former empire. My future empire. It was the first step to ensuring the future wouldn't repeat itself, that the poison wouldn't touch my lips again. And Claire, she had no idea. The woman who orchestrated my murder was now an unknowing accomplice in my resurrection. It was poetic, really. In this life, I would rise again, not as Mason Sullivan, but as Ethan Daniels. And this time, I'd be prepared. For the betrayal, for the enemies cloaked as my family, for everything. But first, it was bedtime. I needed to get up early. After all, I had an empire to reclaim. I was 20 now, the same age as Mason when he took over the Sullivan Empire. A peculiar sense of déjà vu washed over me as I headed to a business conference, representing my own company, Daniels Corporation. Among the attendees were familiar faces, faces I had once considered family. There was Ashton, now the head of the Sullivan Empire, and Amelia, his wife. Amelia, who had once been my wife. Just thinking about it gave me a headache. "Ethan Daniels, right?" Amelia approached me, a practiced smile on her face. "Heard a lot about you. The world's youngest billionaire. Quite the achievement. If only she knew how much more I'd achieve in my past life." "Thanks, Amelia. I've heard a lot about you, too." She blinked at me, a crease between her eyebrows. "Do I know you?" "In another life, maybe." Ashton joined us then, his eyes filled with disdain. I was now a threat to his throne, a position he should never have had. "Ethan, good to see you," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Likewise, Ashton. Nice to finally meet the man leading the Sullivan Empire." We exchanged hollow pleasantries, and I couldn't help but be amused. If they only knew who I was. If they only knew what was coming. As the days passed, my encounters with Amelia became more frequent. I couldn't help but feel a pull towards her, a leftover sentiment from my past life. I knew I had to tread carefully. I couldn't repeat the same mistakes again. And yet, as we laughed over shared stories, debated business strategies, and subtly sparred with our wits, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark that was dangerously familiar. One night, after a heated debate over the future of AI, Amelia sighed and looked at me. Ethan, you remind me of a man I once knew. Oh? Who might that be? Mason Sullivan, the man Ashton succeeded. I guess Mason and I have a lot in common then. She looked at me, her gaze penetrating. Yes, you do. Her words hung in the air. A promise, a threat, a part in my story that was just beginning.